Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Victoria Evans. I'm a science-based intuitive eating specialist helping you stop food fear, food guilt, and self-sabotage so you can eat effortlessly and feel amazing. So in this video, we're going to be talking all about what is hunger-directed eating. Before I dive into that, I wanted to invite you to please like and subscribe. Every time someone hits the subscribe button, I get a little email notification and I get the biggest smile on my face knowing that you're reviewing this content and you're engaging with it and you're liking it. So it really means the world to me if you could subscribe. It just takes 1 second. Additionally, if you'd like even more support about how to achieve food freedom, how to heal your relationship with food, and how to become a hunger-directed eater, then I invite you to book a consult call using the link below for my 90 Days to Food Freedom one-on-one coaching program. All right, without further ado, let's get into it. So what is hunger-directed eating? Well, hunger-directed eating is really listening to your body and its cues. It's understanding when is your body hungry, right? Honoring that hunger and subsequently honoring that fullness. Now, this really dials into what intuitive eating is all about. So I see hunger-directed eating as a practice within the intuitive eating framework. But within that, what I always say, and it's important to note, you are human, which means you're not going to be perfect. The idea that you're only ever going to eat when you're exactly hungry and stop eating when you're exactly full, that type of mentality is setting you up for failure. And furthermore, often it can be smart and proactive and beneficial to be eating when not hungry. For example, this morning I was going on a run. I wasn't particularly hungry when I got up, but I knew that my body needed that energy. Additionally, for example, if you're traveling, you don't have access to food, you have a workout coming up, right? We have to also think proactively about this. So that to say, whether it be for that or maybe it's a special occasion, maybe there's a wedding, you have some wedding cake, someone's birthday, right? Having some cake out for a special meal, or even just it was a super long day, you're stressed and you're wanting to eat some food to help you calm down a little bit. There's going to be times in your life where you're going to be eating when not hungry, and you don't want to be shaming yourself and beating yourself up in those moments. Now, with that, right, if we're always eating when not hungry, that is also a cause for a red flag, right? So it's understanding that if you are making the choice to eat when you're not actually hungry, you're doing so intentionally. So, I'm not hungry right now, but I'm choosing to eat because X, Y, Z, right? And if it becomes a habitual behavior, you're always reaching for that food or not exactly hungry, that's an opportunity for us to check in and see what's going on there, right? Because if we're always eating when not hungry or always eating emotionally, that is simply a message to us from our body that something deeper is going on. And instead of getting mad at ourselves for wanting to eat, we have to dig a little bit deeper and understand, where is that coming from? What is coming up right now that I may be trying to avoid? Or did I eat enough earlier in the day, right? There's a whole bunch of different things we can look at that I do in my work with people to understand what might be going on there if we're feeling called to eat when not hungry. Now, one of the tools that is super helpful in hunger-directed eating is knowing the intuitive eating hunger scale. Now, I'm going to pop that onto the screen right here. But basically, to practice hunger-directed eating, we can use the intuitive eating hunger scale. And this is a scale that is widely used, but I've kind of put my own spin on it here in terms of the descriptions. But basically, this helps us to understand our hunger and our fullness levels in order to eat at the right times. So you can check out this image and have a bit of a visual understanding representation of that scale. So 0 is when you're super hungry, it's painful how hungry you are, completely empty, probably feeling almost like you're going to pass out, right? Dizzy. 1, ravenous, irritable. 2, pretty over hungry, maybe a little bit hangry. We get hangry because hunger and anger are controlled by similar genes. Also, when we're low on energy, it basically sends a panic kind of signal out from our brain, which can create that sense of anger. Lots of different things, but hunger basically is real. 3, noticeable hunger signs. 4, hunger starts to awaken, right? Start to feel it a little bit. 5 is that kind of neutral. We're not really hungry, not really full, just kind of satisfied there. 6 is just satisfied, maybe just slightly full. 7 is satisfied or comfortably full. 8 is a little bit too full. 9, stuffed, uncomfortably full. 10 is you're just feeling almost sick. It's way too much. You're way over full. Now, understanding this scale, this hunger and fullness scale, and looking through these numbers 0 to 10, what we want to do in order to practice hunger-directed eating and intuitive eating is to look at, where are we starting when we're starting to eat, and where are we finishing when we are done eating. So if we are starting to eat when we're at a 0 or a 2, that really is that intuitive eating danger zone. You are way too hungry. And I'm going to dig more into that in a second. If we're starting to eat at around a 3, 4, right, that is what I call the intuitive eating hunger sweet spot. That is the perfect time to start eating. It's not that overwhelming hunger. We're just starting to notice some signs of hunger, starting to kind of awaken in us, but it's not kind of taking over and feeling like I said, that sense of overwhelm. I have to eat right now, almost turning into a bit of a panic. 6, 7 is intuitive eating satiation, right? That little sweet spot there. We're feeling just satisfied or maybe a little bit full, comfortably full, but it's not, we feel, uncomfortable. We feel sick. We don't want to get to that point. So the 6, 7, we want to stop eating. And then the 9, 10, that's that kind of danger zone for intuitive eating. We are feeling way too full. It is too much. We're not feeling so good. Now, an important thing to understand with this is that it takes about 15 or 20 minutes for our brain to register feelings of fullness. So something I see a lot with people when they're trying to practice hunger-directed eating or intuitive eating is that they get way past that comfortable full, not because they weren't trying to tune into their body, but more so because they were eating too quickly. So if we're eating too quickly and we're going to get a second helping, or we're finishing our entire plate so fast, and we're maybe getting more, or really, I said, having everything on the plate, maybe it was more than we had needed, right? That's happening sometimes because we ate so quickly that our body didn't have time to register the feelings of fullness. So I'd always recommend for people, if you're not sure if maybe you want more or not, setting a timer on your phone for 10, 12 minutes or so, right? Letting your body register those feelings of fullness, let that kind of dopamine wind down, that anticipation of reward of more food, getting back more into that prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that's kind of rational thinking, future thinking, can decide, intentionally, do I want more food right now, right? We're registering those feelings of fullness. And from that place, we can make an empowered choice where if I want more food or not. If the answer is yes, go get more food. But before you do that, it's important to check in. Where are you on the scale, right? Are you still a 3, 4? Are you a 5? Where are you on that scale? Always doing so with that information, intention, and awareness behind your eating as well as your fullness. Circling back to what I was saying before, when we're getting to a 0 or a 1 or a 2 on that hunger scale, right, that kind of it's overwhelming hunger, or feeling almost dizzy, really ravenous, if we're at that point before we start eating, this is really problematic because that more primitive part of our brain, the part of our brain whose only job is really to keep us alive, it starts to panic, right? Hunger basically is indicating to our body a lack of energy, right? Calories are energy. So our body, sending out the growling stomach signals, all of that is basically saying, hey, our fuel levels are getting too low, right? This is going to turn out badly. And your brain starts to panic so much about that. So it thinks to itself, I need to have enough energy in case a Viking comes over the hill or a saber-toothed tiger, or, all those types of things, right? And so when our hunger is dropping to that 0 or 1 or 2, we kick into that primitive response where it's coded into our genetics, where if we're getting too hungry, right, we are sent into that eating response. And sometimes that can turn into a binge eating response. Similar for thinking back to all those thousands of years ago, right? If we are hunter and gatherers and we haven't had food for several days, right, and then all of a sudden we come across food, the people who are going to survive are the people who eat quickly, who eat as much as they can. Those are the genes you have passed forward to today, the people who have instilled in them that kind of binging response in order to make sure they have enough energy in their system to survive. So if we're getting to that 0, 1, or 2, we are triggering that old kind of ancestral survival part of our brain, also understanding that our brain has not evolved quickly enough to understand it's not, life and death when we're getting a little bit over hungry there, right? But understanding that that is what is happening. You're feeling out of control. Additionally, if you're seeking out more, high sugar, less nutrient dense foods. So for example, for myself, if I find myself getting super over hungry, 0, 1, 2, I'm not craving the more nutrient dense foods, the foods that can make me feel good. I'm usually craving the candy. I'm usually craving the chips. I'm usually craving the burger, because those are foods that are going to give me that quick hit of energy because they are high calorie. So if you're wanting to practice eating in a way that is more nutrient dense with the foods that make you feel good, that are a little bit more healthful, then it really helps to start tuning into that hunger, right? Knowing where you are on that hunger and fullness scale, so you can start eating in that intuitive eating sweet spot, so you can start to gravitate towards the foods that make you feel good instead of letting yourself get to that 0, 1, or 2, which at that point is very difficult to make empowered, good decisions in terms of choosing foods that are going to really nourish us, because you're basically letting yourself get too hungry, and then your brain is going to send you to eat more foods that are higher calorie, higher sugar, because high calorie means high energy, right? And so understanding that can really help you start to be more intentional about how you're eating and not letting yourself get too hungry. And so building on that as well, so not just when it comes to, eating in that intuitive eating sweet spot and not letting ourselves get to that 0, 1, or 2, but also this has to relate to our fullness levels. So if we are getting into that severe hunger state, 0, 1, 2, right, we're going to likely overeat, and kind of think of it like a pendulum. If you're pulling it back to that 0, 1, or 2, when you let it go, or you could think about those like little metal balls that kind of go back and forth like that, maybe you see on people's desks. If you pull that ball back this way, all the way to that 0, 1, or 2, when you let it go, it's going to, hit all the way out to that 8, 9, 10. And that's what happens if you're letting yourself get to that 0, 1, or 2 on that intuitive eating hunger scale, right? We're going to have that overcompensation. Our brain is going to basically want to replenish those energy stores. We're going to want to get our energy levels back up. What if there's another famine again? What if I don't have access to food again? You're essentially training your brain to be in that feast-famine mentality, that kind of binge restrict mentality, maybe you know it as, right? Because we trained ourselves that there's no food, super hungry. And then when I get access to food and I stumble across it in the wild, right? I guess if it was thousands of years ago, or how our brain is still responding, I'm going to eat as much as I can to make sure I have more energy to get me through that next period of famine in order for me to survive, right? So making sure that we are listening to our bodies, tuning in and checking in, and using that intuitive eating hunger skill to better understand where we're at on the scale when we start and where are we on the scale when we end. And if you're, always finding yourself consistently way too full, 9, 10, that's an opportunity for you to check in, slow down, and see if maybe next time put a little bit less on your plate and just kind of feel around, right? This is about being curious, it's about being compassionate and seeing what makes sense for you. So with that, here are some practical tips to help you start hunger-directed eating and intuitive eating. The first, like I mentioned, is really listening to your body. So paying attention to that hunger and that fullness cues. And now what I wrote down in terms of how I experience hunger and how some of my clients experience hunger and fullness might be different for you. So think about, what does hunger feel like? For me, sometimes it is a stomach growl. Sometimes it is I can't focus on my work. Sometimes I start to feel a little bit dizzy if I'm letting it go really too far. But what does that feel like for you? What are those kind of telltale signs you can better kind of pick it up? Now, when you're starting to eat, when you're moderately hungry, right, asking yourself as you're starting to eat or before you start eating, how hungry am I, right, on that scale, 0 to 10, right? And if you're not hungry at all, that's an opportunity for you to check in and ask yourself, okay, what's going on there, right? If you're wanting to eat and you're a 5 or 6, 7, 8, 9, what's happening? Opportunity to check in. Is there something emotional going on? Am I bored? Am I stressed? Am I procrastinating? Did I, not get enough sleep last night? And my desire to eat more foods right now is because my body's missing that energy from not having that sleep, right? So checking in ourselves and asking those questions. Midway through your meal, midway through eating, asking yourself, how am I feeling now? Like I mentioned, slowing down allows our brain to better register those feelings of fullness. Then after you're done eating, where are you on that scale, that hunger and fullness scale? This is going to help give you an idea of how well you honored that hunger and fullness. Now, as I mentioned before, you're never going to be perfect, right? This is not about perfection. That is diet culture. That is toxic. That is not possible, right? We're human. Therefore, perfection is not achievable, and achieving it is such a waste of time. It's exhausting. It's not fun. Perfectionism really sets you up to feel shame and really triggers and drives disordered eating disorders. So let's not go in that direction. Rather, if you're finding yourself after way past full or hadn't eaten enough, that's just an opportunity for you to check in. This is not, you've never failed with intuitive eating and hunger-directed eating. There only is a learning opportunity. My next tip is to avoid skipping meals, because skipping meals can really lead to that extreme hunger, can really make it harder to control your eating later on, right? And it can drive you towards those higher calorie, high sugar foods, right? As I mentioned, those are high energy foods. So we sometimes find ourselves gravitating towards them if we've skipped meals, or we hadn't eaten enough earlier that day, or we let ourselves get too hungry. The next tip is to stay hydrated, because sometimes your thirst can be mistaken for hunger. So make sure you're hydrating throughout the day. The next is also plan ahead, right? So as I mentioned before, if you know you're not going to have access to food, if you know that you have something that requires that energy, sometimes we have to eat when we're not exactly hungry to make sure that we are giving our body what it needs so we don't get to that 0, 1, or 2, right? And then all of a sudden we're feeling like, oh, I have to eat super quickly. I'm gravitating towards less nutrient-dense foods. With that said, it's okay to eat less nutrient-dense foods. It's okay to have chips and all these types of foods, right? This is really about you checking in. How do you feel? Why are you making these choices? What I always say is that there's no good or bad foods. It's only why and how you choose to consume them, right? An apple can be a good apple or it could be a bad apple depending on why and how you're choosing to consume it, right? If I'm eating an apple because it's delicious, I love the crispy taste of it. I love apples and my mouth is salivating. And you really want the apple, good apple, right? If you're choosing that apple because you really want the cookie, but you're punishing yourself and you're telling yourself you can't have it and you're making it off limits and you're calling it bad food and junk food and all that and then forcing yourself to eat the apple, that apple is what I would consider a bad apple, right? Because how and why you're eating it is coming from that negative place. So any type of food can be good or bad, just depending on how and why you're consuming it. And that's your opportunity for you to get curious. So if we're always making foods off limits, if we're always telling ourselves, I can't have this, I shouldn't have this, I'm so bad, I'm so naughty, that polarizing language, making those foods off limits is going to make you want it more. So a lot of my work digs into the psychology, the mindset of our eating. And my work, I never tell you what to eat, what not to eat. I'm not giving meal plans. Rather, I'm teaching you about how you think about food so that you can make that empowered choice. You can use that hunger-directed eating. You can use intuitive eating, eat from a place of empowerment, eat from a place that feels effortless, and nourish your body and feel good and feel strong and feel amazing while still having the ability to have the cake when you want or the cookies or whatever those things are, but doing so from a place of empowerment. All right, so that is what I have for you on hunger-directed eating. If you want the intuitive eating hunger scale, you can send me a message or you can drop a comment into the video description below. It's probably the easiest way, and then I can just send it to you there. But I'm more than happy to send that to you. I have a whole bunch of iPhone wallpapers that I just mocked up with cute little backgrounds and stuff. And I also have different quotes. I can send them all to you if you'd like. But basically, just as a quick reminder, as before you start eating, check in. Where are you? Mid-eating, where are you on the scale? When you finish, where are you? Right? And bonus tip there is to set a timer on your phone for about 10 to 15 minutes after you finish eating and see how that changes, how that fullness level changes. I know even for myself, I'll finish eating a meal and it pops into my head like, oh, I want to get something else, or maybe I want some candy or some chocolate, which I have total permission to have, but I usually make myself sit and wait 5, 10, 15 minutes. And then by the time I've waited that time, I actually think to myself, oh, I'm actually full. I actually don't really feel like any more food. I can always have it later if I want. But in that moment, I had to let my body register those feelings of fullness. I had to let that dopamine, that excitement from that past meal wind down in order for me to make an empowered choice. Now, with that said, if you like these type of tools, if you like the way that I'm teaching you this information, very science-based, I believe that education is empowerment and allows you to make long-lasting changes. If you like that, I invite you to check out the link below to learn more about my programs and how I can help support you in having a healthy, and amazing, and effortless relationship with food. And don't forget to like and subscribe, as well as comment below what type of video you'd like me to make next. Thank you so much for watching. Until next week, have an amazing rest of your day.